Hi, Professor. You are Assistant Professor, Department of History in Millersville University. And I think you, the person we can talk to, because history is not only the past, but also what is going on today. I would like to know your impression about Kony 2012 documentary.
Thank you very kindly for having me. I'd like to start first by saying that Kony, a person who comes from the northern part of Uganda, had been notorious for a very long time. The crisis in the north has been going on for the last 20, roughly about that, 22 or so years. In sum total, we could say that this conflict at its most worst time, about 1990s coming to the year 2000, the entire world community ignored it. A lot of attempts were tried to ensure that the warring parties, the government of Uganda and the LRA, that's the Lord's Resistance Army, commanded by Joseph Kony, would come to a compromise. Often the disruption has come from President Yoweri Museveni, and we could look at the various opportunities that were availed, and he would give ultimatums. It is this ultimatum that will again get the LRA back. We need to also factor in one thing. The LRA does not have a lot of support in the community. That is why their recruitment strategy is to abduct children by force. So as often as we have the failure of peace talks, we have a spike in abduction because those of the LRA, particularly Joseph Kony as the commander, will want to strengthen his army and will take kids. We could here say that any attempt that would have been timely, any intervention that would have been very timely, should have come about the time when abduction was worse. Any intervention that should be very helpful should have come at a time when the entire community were crying out to the international community, that's the entire Chuli community and their leaders, were crying out to the international community that something should be done. The peace talks must succeed. Now, we come to 2012. We hear the question of the Kony 2012. They go on saying that they're working with the United States government to send in the army. And we keep asking ourselves very important questions, and here is one. Why, at the time when there were terrible crises, nothing was done? Second, now that the LRA have actually left Uganda and they're operating somewhere in the Congo, why are we sending military advisors to Uganda but not Congo? Third, we're asking ourselves, all the abductees were children. Their state failed, that's the Ugandan state, failed to protect them from abduction. Now they are hostages with rebel forces. And we're saying, as a hostage, we're going to kill you. Now, talk to your mother, who knows that his child or her child has been abducted, is with the LRA, and during the Juba peace talks, were alive. And now you're calling world attention to support you, so we kill off the very kids that the state failed to protect. The very children that international community could not intervene to ensure that they come home, and we move forth military. We think this is wrong, and that is why we're saying the best approach would be to follow the voices of the community and have these children return home alive. Let me make one point before I move, so that I give you time to ask our second question. Often there is a concept called Stockholm Syndrome. Abductees at certain moments will identify with their abductors. In the US, we could look at the case of Elizabeth Smart. the US government did not move to kill Elizabeth Smart. They wanted to make sure whatever would be done to get her back. And for a long time, she identified with her captor. And there are many of these cases, Siamese liberation movement. Why, when it comes to the case of Africa, the lives of abductees are not important? Why do you just want to kill, 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 kill? What's wrong with that picture? So I think Kony's 2012 does not serve the objective of peace, does not serve the objective of building a strong, regional, peaceful African countries.
So how would you like it to be? Would you like to see it differently done? You mean they failed to do it in the past, but this is now. And now what they brought out is the documentary.
Let's look at the failures. We could look at series of peace talks that were disrupted by the president of Uganda. We could also look at the letter that was written by the LRA Joseph Kony that came out and is in the Ugandan Hansard. Hansard is a record of parliamentary debate. That letter is printed there, that he wants peace talk. We could then move on to, let's talk about the Juba peace talks. ICC came in immediately before even the peace talks were signed. They already indicted LRA. From a surrender, the LRA opted now to, wait a minute, I surrender my guns and go to jail. That disrupted. And Museveni later on came up and disowned his own peace team. That he wasn't interested, really, he wasn't interested in the peace talk. Both the LRA, the Ugandan government, the international community bear responsibilities for the failure of Juba peace talks. And we think that it could be very easy because we see often a pattern where if the LRA are not on the defensive, they're peaceful. They don't abduct people because they don't see the military threat. Abduction is related to securing little children to fight the wars. Can we spare the lives of these children? I believe peace talk is the best way forward. We should move beyond the propaganda of a blame game that has no proper evidence. Because when we look at the evidence, the blame goes to everybody else. And in fact, we could look at what the UN, I think, Jan Egeland, Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, what he said. We could look also at one of the UN staff who said she apologizes to the people of northern Uganda because of a conspiracy of silence. Think about that.
Yeah. Why do you think this guy is still free?
I believe when we look at evidence that is in place, let's take the case of northern Uganda. The war continued because it was serving economic interests of the Ugandan military. There was a report that was done by a Ugandan Major General, David Tinyefonza, who is part of the Museveni's military outfit, the UPDF, and currently a presidential advisor. And he said the units in the north were comprised, and this is a report, a Ugandan government report, were comprised of what he called ghost soldiers, soldiers who did not exist. But they were paid. So you have a division that has only a commander. A division is approximately 12,000 men. So these guys would take the money, put it in their pocket. You have every little outfit, and you can read a lot about this, published in Ugandan newspapers. So the war served economic interests of the commanders, and the government report that was done by the Ugandan People's Defense Force, UPDF, under the command of President Yoweri Museveni, talks a great deal about that. We have not seen anybody being punished for that. That's a problem. Second thing, the LRA serves the Museveni's politics of ensuring that he militarizes himself because he removed the presidential term limit. He needs military firepower so he can maintain himself violently if need be. And he said, and often said it, that he will not politics because if he leaves power, nobody will listen to him. And he is condemning Uganda to suicide if he's no longer the president. When he dies, will Uganda die? He's about 60 or something years old. Uganda was there before him. Uganda will stay and carry on after him. And then eventually he said that he killed his animal. Who is that person to chase him away? His animal meaning Uganda. Uganda is a personal property. So Museveni runs Uganda. So he needs that military power. The third thing, which here is my, I need more evidence, but I would say my projection. I think that the LRA, the call to arms now, is to undercut the Chinese. Chinese need for raw materials. Western powers need for raw materials. And the general area where the LRA is, particularly the DRC, super wealthy in oil. So, and diamonds and gold, and Uganda's oil that has been found close to where northern Uganda is, part of southern Sudan. I believe this is part of the international intrigue that tries to secure oil. However, you do so like the Cold War was by picking one humanitarian issue in Africa and militarizing it. And then you send your advisors their ground boots on the ground. And eventually dictators are planted in those areas, like Mobutu was in the Congo, militarized, and they go against the population. And one important thing, which I tried to raise earlier, we need African voice in defining African problems and designing solutions to African problems. The slave trade was possible because Europeans said, we are animals, we are cursed. That faith befits us. Colonialism came, we are savages, we are barbarians. European voices. We deserve to be treated the way because we are perpetual children. The Cold War came, we are for democracy and human rights. All the bad leaders who killed us, the Cold War, while also they maintain apartheid South Africa, they maintain bad groups in Africa. That is not counted under human rights. Now, post-Cold War, we're looking at now issues like terrorism. So, let me wind up here so you understand clearly. Yeah. You have time. African journalists are now being defended by the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, Western-based. African human rights, not by Africans, are being defended now by either Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, not based in Africa. We could look at African economic system. The World Bank is controlling Africa, not Africans. We can now look at African security is in the hands of African, not African. So African are only people on earth who do not have voice in defining their problems, who don't have voice in solution to their problems, who do not have voice in telling other people to stop. So we are victims of a definition of our problems that serve other people's interests. That's why the solutions will not always work. We must not be disempowered socially, economically, politically. So we are only simply working beings, not citizens with rights in their countries.
Is it not because Africans themselves don't stand up and do things by themselves? Like Kony is free. He's free in Congo now. So I see three countries. I see Uganda, I see Congo, DRC, and Rwanda. So what can we do? Why those three countries can't take care of this situation by themselves?
One thing which is very important, major conflicts around the world ended through negotiations. And we should always stop looking to military means. Military means kill innocent people. Africa has too many guns. Africa has suffered death for a long time. All the major conflicts in Uganda ended through peace talks. Only in cases where it did not end in peace talks, we have problems. Museveni shot his way to power, it never brought him peace. For the last 26 years he's been in power, the LRA and various rebel groups kept fighting him. Where there had been peace talks, look at the case of South Africa and the apartheid regime, people have settled. The worst groups of the type of LRA, Renamo, in Mozambique, In fact, Alfonso Dhlakama, that was more severe, even as severe as the LRA. Last year was running, a few years ago, was running for presidency. Peace talks. We could look at Zimbabwe, racist regime in Zimbabwe. Peace talks. An exceptional case will be in Angola, but the killing of UNITA, they still had to talk. So that the underlying reasons for these problems can be resolved. If we need a country, we need to live together. Peace talk is the solution. And right now, look at the US. We say that we don't talk to the Taliban. Now we want to talk to the Taliban. It's just that the Taliban somehow are not interested in talking with us. But understand, we don't talk to terrorists. We realized later on, after thousands of people have died, that I think peace talk is useful. Why don't we safeguard lives? So we need genuine peace talks. The LRA, the government of Uganda, the international community, with proper guarantees, in sync with the needs of the community, should avoid bloodletting, come to peace talk, and make sure the issues are resolved with the underlying reasons equally resolved. Underlying reason is political, not military. So you take a military means, you leave the political reason intact. That is not good for stability.
Is this situation profiting Museveni?
Absolutely. The issue of democracy is destructive. Understand, a few years down the line, Ugandan constitution says you cannot run for